Hello world. Great Giza Pyramid system flow. Well, let's rebuild the structure. If you've seen my past videos, the pyramid phrenology, you know how there's a waving pattern, a sweeping pattern to the outside edge, which retains and quarantines the ambient static electricity to the top area. That basically acts as a Van de Graaff generator, sitting there waiting to be toyed with. From the halfway point, we have two conduits that come into the system. Now the one conduit, the only one that breaches the structure, this is the air intake. Now that will get joined together with the hydrogen that we are going to extract from the bottom of the system and brought up to the top and joined together with the oxygen to reform water. Now this water will be the flow that comes down and will pull the static electricity with it. First off, some of that steam, water vapor, mist, is going to work its way up into this shaft, which does not breach the structure and will allow the steam, mist, water vapor to condense and collect some static electricity as it reaches that bubble of static and then starts to recede since buoyancy and density. The denser molecules, as they come together, will become more dense and fall down into the system. Also, as they cool, fall down into the system, and they'll run back down. Now, pieces they don't like to talk about much anymore are an area called the Thieves' Tunnel. Thieves' Tunnel is just before the area they call the boss mark, and it protrudes into the wall about 10-12 feet. Along the top edge, the top south edge, is a finely tuned, finely hewn conduit, and then you've got the area itself. At the end of it, it protrudes up and joins with that conduit. This was confirmed by a couple of people, but one of them, James Brown, and his website was Earth Milk Ancient Energy, and took one of those 2 million candle power flashlights and beamed it into there, and was able to see the light from within the end of the tunnel. So that conduit connects. Not really. If you want to dispute that, that's fine. You go ahead and you dispute that all you want. Comes down, falls into that area. There's a pool at the bottom edge of the area. There's also a little ring a little way in, but that's when we really get into reverse engineering the structure. But anyway, this particular hot water, steamed, energized water, will come in, will pool, and then we'll start to run down the system. It runs down the center of the Grand Gallery through the area that we today call the Grand Step. But if you look at it, it used to be a funnel, and we poured cement on there, which is why that part is uneven. The rest of it's all nice and perfect. It will come in so that the liquid will come down and pour in at an elevation just below the step. It does that because the energy, static electricity, likes to ride on surface of the water, not in the water itself, and will get trapped within the box. And the way that the system is designed, with the wells going down the side and the upper area, so that all the condensation will fall and drip and fall and drip and into the system and have a constant, basically, rain. It's going to be like a rainforest pyramid. All that, every time a little driplet of water falls, will be pulling more static electricity down into the system to a lower elevation, eventually getting it past the area where it couldn't penetrate on the outside because of the 35th level, which, if you look at the step, has a larger area than the steps above and below it, making basically a gap for that static electricity to have to hurdle. Well, here we hurdle that static electricity, or I should say herd that static electricity down into the system. Now in here it's going to pool. It's going to pool at a approximately the same elevation. So that only goes to the middle point, so let's kind of be semi-accurate. At the same elevation as the entrance on the outside. Approximately the same elevation. There's a little bit of deviation there, but not enough to bicker about right now. The way that the system is designed, the water level within the system will be maintained at just below the walkway. This will make the condensation that falls in this room pool within this area until this area reaches the maximum point of saturation of energy that it can withhold. Once it reaches its maximum point, the system has two conduits of exit out of the room. One being the conduit that, by proxy, shorts to that. It comes within reach, and any good amount of energy will hurdle that gap. I mean, electricity does follow the path of least resistance, so it'll kind of work like one of those perpetual motion holders that you have by Mr. Deed Scalman. Okay, and that's what we're looking at right there. And then you have the other conduit, which is the path of lesser resistance to get the energy out of the room. And the energy actually is quarantined and pooled within the niche, and the niche is slightly off center, and this conduit is 6 inches closer to the east wall. And hence, it is the path of lesser resistance. Now, where does it go and what do they do with it? That's the whole rest of the story. And that's what the other two structures come into play about, because this didn't work in a vacuum. This was part of a system. Oh, I told you I'd tell where the hydrogen came from. Right. All right. At ground level, there's a magical room they like to refer to as the grotto. It is set up with a double bubble room in such a way that the upper area and the lower area, they cross paths, so that any water rising would hit where it couldn't rise anymore, and any gases pushing down would reach where they couldn't push it down anymore. It was like a self-locking room. But in any case, that room is where would feed down another pit in the only two places this structure touches Earth is there, and the pit in the subterranean room. And if you remember electrolysis from 7th grade, if you didn't have Common Core education, you're going to get electrolysis. The hydrogen goes out the holes that they like to blame on where the king would hide his scrolls. But yet they call this the well shaft, so why would the king hide his scrolls in a well? Never made sense. Anyway, out those conduits, across the bottom of the structure, where this whole area is bathed in limestone, and I'll say that was fill, and we'll get to that later. Poured, I should really say. And this is piped up. This is actually not in the center. This is off to the side. This is in the center, but would be piped up to the back of and to the top of the structure. Well, when I say the back, this whole area is within like a 30-foot section. King's chamber, Queen's chamber, subterranean chamber, hallways, grand gallery. It's all within a nice 2D plane within the structure. Makes it much easier to map. The areas that are 3D are actually up here, and where the one conduit comes out, circles up, and the conduit comes out of there, comes up and around, so it passes around the grand gallery. So there are pieces that actually work in 3D, and it's still a very nice, simple way to show it. But this area is going to have energy, this area is going to have energy, this area is going to continue to condensate. As it condensates, it's also going to be causing a vacuum, which is going to cause a draft coming in across the surface of the water. Water would be across here and out of the system. Now the whole system will fill up, this whole shaft will fill up, but this will fill up with what I'm going to refer to as light water. If you know what heavy water and light water is, then you know that over time the more and more you electrolyze water, the more and more percentage of heavy water you're going to get. And this whole system was designed to maintain the water within the system. And I believe, actually, there's a fill line. I call it a fill line right about. Well, it's actually kind of here in the system. I think that would be the fill line of where they actually had to start it with heavy water before they put light water on the outside. And it's the heavy water fighting to get its equilibrium that could be some of the energy they're playing with. But that's a story for a bigger day. Part of the idea that makes me think that is the lock right outside, where you have the area where it's divided into three. I believe those are where the three pools from the other two structures, they all come together, and it's designed to maintain the heavy water not being able to get out of the system, because the heavy water can't get to the higher elevation to get out. It's like a lock system for different densities of liquids. And in this case, I believe it's just using the densities of water. But in either case, that would be the oxygen. Well, I'll tell you about the oxygen. The oxygen does two things. When it comes up and it bubbles out of the system, because oxygen is not a light gas, so it would actually kind of take energy to get up to the top. You'd have to fill it and just allow it to create an abundance. But they didn't need it because they have oxygen from the outside world. But what occurs is as it's coming up, it had to bubble through what they like to call the loosely fitting rocks. I say they were engineered a little bit better than loosely fitting, but for right now, let's just go with loosely fitting, and would create a oxygen bubble where more oxygen is coming up than the water coming in, because they're fighting to get through the rocks, and that would separate the inside system from the outside world through the oxygen bubble. Now the other thing is you've got your three rings around this particular pool of water there. That is going to act, oh man, I had it, now I misplaced it. Just like a Faraday ring around your electricity, there it is, around your electrical wire, that would create a, stop the buzz and annoying features of static electricity upon the electrical wires, or interference. We know of these things nowadays because we use them and we're familiar with it. Days when people were working with cobbler shoes and leather and pitchforks really didn't have a knowledge or understanding of how simple a Faraday ring on an electrical cord can make your TV not have static on it, or make your microphone not buzz. Little things like that are much more of a knowledge space today, commonplace knowledge, and hence this structure can be reevaluated much easier today than if I tried to explain this to somebody in the early 1900s when heavy water hadn't even been discovered yet, and electricity was still not really commonplace for every household, let alone DC power. So, and most people didn't even know what a Van de Graaff generator was. I really like to put my hand on there, watching my hair stand up. Well, my hair stands up as it is right now, but even better. You get some cute blonde there with thin hair, and ooh, yeah. Anyway, now we understand static electricity and how it can be utilized, and that it is a true power source. These guys knew it a long, long time ago, and I really think we need to wake up.